Now, if Earth's history were a movie, we humans would only take up the last second of the end credits. Our planet has been around for about 4.6 billion years, but our human story began about 300,000 years ago, in Africa. Now our ancestors had some wild adventures in nature. They could have run into creatures so big they'd make today's elephants look like puppies. The woolly mammoth is a pretty famous animal, sure. His cousin, though, the Columbian mammoth, not so much. This giant used to roam places from Canada all the way down to Mexico. Unlike the furrier woolly mammoths, which hung out in colder places, these animals had shorter hair, resembling huge elephants. They also had incredibly large tusks, like 12 feet worth of spiraling sturdy tusks. And they weren't just for show, they came in handy when facing predators. That includes our ancestors. If you think about sloths these days, you're picturing these adorably slow creatures. They couldn't possibly be in your list of most dangerous animals. Well, their grandparents might have. For starters, we call them ground sloths, and they vary a lot in size. Some were as big as rhinos, and others, like the Megatherium, were as colossal as elephants. Imagine seeing a 20-foot-long sloth which doesn't mind chewing on some meat every now and then, at least in theory. Ever heard of Bigfoot? Well, our next animal kind of looks like him, but is a distant cousin to orangutans. Meet Gigantopithecus, the largest primate to ever call our planet its home. Standing tall at 10 feet and weighing more than 600 pounds, these animals were amazing to look at in real life. Unlike Bigfoot, they weren't constantly hiding. In fact, it's believed they were peaceful and gentle creatures. Sadly, they faded away about 100,000 years ago, mainly because their food sources slowly became unavailable. Those lush, fruity forests they called home eventually turned into dry grasslands. Next on our list is the cave hyena. Weighing a chunky 250 pounds and standing 3 feet tall, these beasts were as long as a grown-up lying down. What's even more interesting about these creatures is that they love hanging out in groups. A pack could be as big as 30 of these animals, which meant they could easily take on even the biggest, heaviest mastodons. Our ancient families would have needed to stay alert around these hungry specimens. Sadly for these hyenas about 20,000 years ago, their numbers started going down. Soon enough, they completely disappeared from the planet. Quick pop quiz. What's called a tiger but isn't really one? It's the saber-toothed tiger. I mean, sure, they belong to the feline family, but they aren't technically tigers. First appearing around 42 million years ago, in July I think, many of their kind were gone before we even showed up. However, early Americans might have bumped into a couple of specimens from this group. If that really happened, it would have been quite the encounter. Think of the biggest wild lion today or the hefty Siberian tiger. These big cats also had some incredible features hidden in their fur. They were good at sneaking around, hiding, and pouncing on mammoths bigger than themselves. Their bite wasn't that strong, but they could open their jaws wide, like twice as much as a lion. And although their teeth were a bit on the weak side, they had buff forearms to pin down their dinner, giving those big fangs a purpose. Not the kind of kitty you'd want to play with. Dire wolves made their debut about 250,000 years ago. They were like the gray wolves we know today, but a lot stronger. While wolves these days stretch out to about 6 feet and tip the scales at 170 pounds max, dire wolves were about 5 feet and about 150 pounds. Found all over North and South America, they had admirable jaws, biting nearly a third harder than their modern counterparts. Also, their favorite snack was horses. But just like many other majestic beasts of the past, they faded away around 10,000 years ago. Now, names can be deceiving. Take the American lion, for example. It's not really a lion, it's more of a panther's big cousin. The other part of the name is correct, though. They did live in America about 330,000 years ago. This feline was no lap cat either. They were at the top of the wildcat pyramid, weighing a colossal 772 pounds. That's like stacking 4 grown men on a scale. Even the mighty African lion would look a tad bit shy beside these beasts. With the muscle to take down a bison, you wouldn't want to accidentally interrupt their dinner. They parted ways with this planet around 11,000 years ago, right after the last ice age. Now down in Australia, about 50,000 years ago, I wasn't around then, there lurked a relative of the Komodo dragon, the Megalania. Experts love to have debates on how big it was. Some say it stretched out to 23 feet. Others think it was just about 11 feet long. Either way, they were basically mega-sized Komodo dragons with a dangerous bite. If you think bears are already big and fluffy now, let's introduce the short-faced bear. While this big creature stood on its hind legs, it towered at 14 feet. With long limbs, they could outrun today's bears, hitting speeds up to 40 miles per hour. These ultra bears sadly disappeared around 11,600 years ago. Now imagine a crocodile. Okay, imagine that same crocodile, only supersized, with sporty legs, doing its thing in Australia about 1.6 million years ago. Well, say hello to the quincana. These crocs were extremely large, reaching 23 feet. And no, they weren't lazy river loungers. These creatures really love spending time on land. They evolved to have strong legs for their chases and razor-sharp teeth designed for slicing, not gripping. When did we stop sharing beaches with them? About 40,000 years ago. The name elephant bird might not sound familiar, but try to picture a bird that stood tall, as high as a basketball hoop at 10 feet, and weighed as much as a small car, 1,500 pounds. Their eggs were equally huge, like 150 chicken eggs bundled up into one. Now, as amazing as these birds sound, there's a lot we still don't know about them. They're hard to study, as most extinct animals are. Still, some recent studies have given us some clues. Scientists have been examining ancient molecules from their fossilized eggshells. It's an awesome piece of evidence, since these birdie shells were thick, preserving precious DNA inside. Plus, there are tons of these eggshell fragments sprinkled all over Madagascar's beaches. Because of these findings, we now know these birds were herbivores and loved eating leaves and seeds. We also know the tiny kiwi bird is its closest living relative. Now, dodos were these amazing birds we also used to share the planet with. They're like distant cousins to ancient pigeons. To give you some perspective, imagine a chunky bird weighing about 50 pounds. Similar to chickens, turkeys, and ostriches, dodos were also the types of birds that couldn't fly. Their wings were small, and they had the muscle strength of, well, a wet noodle. Now, you might have heard the word dodo used as a name for creatures that aren't that bright. Don't get confused, though, by this name. These birds were in fact intelligent. Scientists were able to figure that out by studying their fossils. It turns out that they were good at smelling stuff, unlike most birds that are all about the visuals. These creatures aren't around for us to study anymore, but that might change. One evolutionary biologist is on a mission to fully understand these amazing ancient birds. On that note, she revealed that the dodo's DNA has been completely sequenced. There are even talks about potentially bringing dodos back to life. They would make a nice addition to the lovely beaches of Mauritius, the place they used to call home many, many years ago. Ah, that's funny. Well, everything is when you're a giant hyena, Pachyrhinoceros. If you want to picture how animals from ancient times look like, just imagine them way bigger with larger and sharper teeth. And wait, like that isn't enough? Yup, you had to be one mighty beast to survive in such times when everything around you is like 5XL. This hyena was up to 3 feet tall with a weight of 400 pounds. That's the size of a modern lion and around 3 times bigger than today's hyena. The ancient one also had shorter legs, which is also the reason plenty of prehistoric creatures went extinct. Over time, they ran out of food, but couldn't run fast or long enough to catch prey. Also, they couldn't escape quickly enough if there was some bigger guy nearby. Ancient and modern hyenas have quite similar habits. Diet, meat, and meat. They both prefer to steal fruit from other usually smaller predators rather than go hunting on their own. And of course, they're both always smiling at everyone around. Cheese! You always somehow picture sharks as those marine animals we should be afraid of, right? Not whales. They're mostly good-natured, eating their plankton, spraying out water through that hole in their backs and stuff. And of course, they could get a little clumsy from time to time, so they turn over a ship. Anyway, they're not that into hunting humans. Well, if we all lived in the time of this 50-foot, 50-ton whale, Leviathan, I like to call Toothy, let's just say going to the beach would never be the same. The beast weighed like 6 elephants and was longer than a truck. Oh yeah, about that Toothy thing? This whale had teeth longer than your palm and a quite refined hunting instinct. So it went after all marine animals, including other whales too. Its only rival was the megalodon itself, the only biggest and scariest shark that ever lived on our planet. Okay, of course, this list is full of giant and dangerous animals with extra sharp teeth who you're certainly glad they went extinct. But there's also some close relative to a human ancestor here too. Hello, distant cousin? Paranthropus. So our cousin P had a big brain, well at least for those times, and good reflexes, which is why they could defend themselves against some bigger and less brainy creatures that were after them. They mostly ate plants, roots, nuts, soft fruits, young leaves, probably insects, and seeds. They were around 5 feet tall and 150 pounds in weight. Not that big compared to other prehistoric mammals, but still big enough to survive those tough times. Way to go, P! The next one is, yes, I'm very happy these things went extinct, prehistoric mammal, Gorgonopsia. They were something between mammals and reptiles with, of course, very, very big 5-inch saber-like teeth, an 18-inch long skull, and the size of a modern bear. At their beginnings, these guys were really small, no bigger than a dog. After a while, evolution did its thing and turned them into the biggest carnivores of their time, which was over 250 million years ago. I wasn't around then. Scientists still don't know if they had clear skin, fur, or scales, but they do know these beasts had rather long legs compared to the rest of their body, which means they could run much faster than many other animals from those times. Andrewsarchus, or Andy, my nickname for it, is everything you would attribute to today's predators, such as tigers, wolves, or hyenas. Only a bit more intimidating version, of course, with extremely sharp teeth. Who would have thought the biggest meat-eating mammal that ever lived is actually a part of the family where pigs, camels, and antelopes came from? It had the size of a modern bison, with a weight of at least half a ton. Andy wasn't that picky with the menu, so it went after most other animals that lived back then, which was around 40 million years ago. It seems ancient times were those where tigers or some other predators were afraid of pigs, unlike today. Yup, step back, Terminator pig, Entelodon, is on its way. Okay, research actually showed they were more like hippos, whales, and its cousin Andy. But this cool nickname has already been given, so we can't go back. Early Terminator pigs were no bigger than today's swines, but they grew to become cow-size over time. They also had short snouts, but a couple of million years later, evolution decided that's not scary enough and made their lower and upper jaws much longer. Oh, and they got an even sharper set of canines, a special How to Creep Your Rivals edition. Whew! Finally, an ancient mammal we don't have to be afraid of. Well, at least if we're not in its way, because if this giant accidentally stepped on you, squish. But at least its menu consisted of plants, so we would be safe at some point. Let me introduce you to the gentle giant thunderbeast, Brontotherium. It had quite a sturdy nasal horn, weighed 3 tons, and was 16 feet in length, which is bigger than a modern rhino. The size, unfortunately, didn't help it much. Andy was always just breathing down its neck, preying at it and its companions. Such a list definitely can't go without the menacing saber-toothed cat. Around 4 feet long, 100 pounds, agile, completely capable of hunting in coordinated packs. But you know cats, they like to brag about the catch they got on their own. That's our Megatherion. You can find her and her companions all over the world, in Europe, Asia, North America, and Africa. Now, we often think all big cats are into running after their prey, but Megan wasn't built for speed at all, nor did it sprint after her prey like some other cats. No, she preferred to wait for the prey to get closer. She would choose a good spot, climb up some tall tree, hide, and simply chill. After a while, some innocent herbivores would go there to drink some water and bam! Surprise! Megan's down. Her hunting style is something we see in leopards today. Teeth were her main weapon, so gotta watch out for those big upper canines. Oh, finally a name I can more easily pronounce, so I don't have to come up with my own. The giant short-faced bear. This beast could run up to 40 miles per hour. After it cornered its prey, the bear would rear up to its full height, 13 feet, so the poor animal knew nothing good was about to come. Cave bears usually prefer vegetables, but as far as this short-faced one was concerned, nah, meat is way better. It liked to hunt as well as collect what other predators would leave behind. Also, as far as is known, apparently no one ever asked this short-faced bear, "Hey, why the long face?" Leo, the prehistoric lion, Thylacoleo. Gee, sounds like a pharmaceutical. Anyway, 5 feet long, 200 pounds, insanely strong jaws, sharp teeth, long retractable claws, muscular body. Hey, it's me. No, not really. It also had a surprisingly powerful tail. Leo actually comes from the land down under, where ancestral kangaroos lived, and they also had quite strong tails to balance themselves. Okay, speaking of kangaroos, here's one small surprise: Leo's roots. You would think kangaroos, koala bears, and giant wombats were there just to live a happy life until they became someone's breakfast. But their family somehow raised an animal that looked like a saber-toothed tiger but with bigger teeth. Yes, Leo, way to go, breaking the stereotypes. Leo was somewhere at the top of the food chain in his times, even though he had one quite strong rival, a giant monitor lizard, Megalania, or even some plus-size crocodile, Quincana. Okay, move guys, this is not a video about reptiles, wait your turn. Prehistoric age, dinosaurs ruled all over the region, making a mess, while other animals shiver in fear and hide from them. Hey, not so fast, dinos! There's Mr. R, Rapenomamus, a mysterious mammal that decided to stand up to the authorities. He showed up 130 million years ago and was a badger-like 3-foot-long animal. Doesn't sound much compared to the T-Rex and bigger dinos, but was way bigger than some of those feathery dinosaurs from the same time. Not only that, he would eat them. We don't know how exactly, but let's just say Mr. R had his own ways. I'm guessing it was for breakfast.
Antarctica wasn't always a frozen wasteland. A long time ago, it was full of life, and 56 million years ago, something terrifying stalked its jungles. A giant, flesh-eating bird. It was around 6 feet tall and weighed as much as a lion. For millions of years, nothing could challenge it. So why did it disappear? And could there be even bigger predators still hidden beneath the ice? Paleontologists found 2 massive claw bones in Antarctica, sharp, curved, and powerful, belonging to this bird. They were dug up from the Epresian-aged rocks of Seymour Island, which means they're around 40 to 50 million years old. Their shape left no doubt. These were the so-called terror birds. Their scientific name is Forus raceti, some of the most fearsome predators to ever walk the earth. They were flightless and didn't even need wings. Instead, they could sprint at breakneck speeds, like ostriches from a nightmare. For millions of years, these birds ruled South America. But now, for the first time, their presence has been confirmed in Antarctica. No surprise here. Back then, South America and Antarctica were still connected, allowing animals to easily commute between continents. So these birds probably migrated south to adapt to life on Antarctica's prehistoric landmass. It didn't just survive here, it thrived. But at some point, this nightmare of an animal vanished. Why? Most likely because of the temperature changes. Antarctica was cooling, slowly turning into the frozen wasteland we know today. Its prey may have declined, leaving the predator without enough food. Eventually, it disappeared, leaving no descendants behind. Researchers hope that they'll find a complete skeleton eventually. They're also wondering where there might be even bigger species waiting to be discovered. Perhaps these birds evolved into a completely new Antarctic lineage. But for now, all we have are two giant creepy claws. People often think that there are almost no animals or plants in Antarctica. But that's not true at all. Penguins waddle around, and forget the cute tiny ones. Antarctica used to have 6-foot-tall monsters. The emperor penguins are the largest penguin species alive today. They can dive over 1,800 feet deep and hold their breath for over 20 minutes. There were giant ancient penguins around 38 million years ago. They were the size of humans. Fossils show they had long, sharp beaks, making them terrifying hunters of fish and squid. The fish there are also absolutely fascinating. Forget giant squids. Colossal squids are nightmares even bigger. Some reach over 40 feet long with massive, super sharp beaks and eyes the size of dinner plates. Finally, orcas, the apex predators of the Antarctic Ocean. They hunt in packs, working together like a wolf pack of the sea to take down seals, fish, and even massive whales. There are even tiny plants like moss and algae. Antarctic hairgrass and pearlwort. They somehow survive against all odds. There are many other myths going on about Antarctica. For example, some people think that when icebergs break off from glaciers, they immediately start drifting straight into the open ocean until they melt. But the reality is way more chaotic. First, when an iceberg breaks off from a glacier or ice shelf, it has to deal with underwater obstacles. It can stay stuck on the seafloor for decades without moving. Then they get caught in powerful whirlpools and spin in place for months. One iceberg, a 23A, spent nearly 40 years frozen in place before finally breaking free, only to get caught in a swirling ocean vortex for another 8 months. After that, their paths are influenced by ocean currents, tides, winds, and even underwater topography. They don't just float freely. Their movements are full of literal, unexpected twists. And speaking of glaciers, another strange rumor is that some humans can't travel more than 311 miles inland in Antarctica because of an impassable ice wall, freezing jet fuel, deadly winds, and no oxygen. But this is completely false. Antarctica has been explored by planes, vehicles, and even scientists on foot. There's an entire research station sitting at the South Pole. People live there all year long. The ice wall is real, a massive ice cliff rising above the ocean. But that isn't some secret barrier, it's an ice shelf. These are thick slabs of ice that form when glaciers slowly flow off the land and spread over the ocean. Almost 3/4 of Antarctica's coastline is made up of them, but they don't form some giant ring around the world. Antarctica is one of the most extreme places on Earth, but we've conquered its challenges, and we keep learning more about it every year. That's why every year, millions of dollars are poured into keeping research stations running, protecting wildlife, and making sure the people who live there have everything they need. But where does all this money go? Well, Antarctica stations are basically small cities. There's electricity, heating, water purification, food storage, and medical facilities. The biggest station, McMurdo, is basically a town with over 1,000 people in summer. It has everything from a fire station to a gym. The South Pole Station is super deep inland, so it's one of the hardest places to supply. Getting food and fuel there requires airplanes flying thousands of miles in extreme cold. But the internet loves a good mystery. When Google Maps revealed what looked like a massive doorway in Antarctica, conspiracy theorists went wild. People joked about everything from Bigfoot's vacation home to a secret base, or even a Star Trek spaceship hangar hidden in the ice. But there's a way simpler and less exciting explanation. It's actually a grounded iceberg, a chunk of ice that got stuck in shallow water and is now slowly melting. As ice moves across the landscape, it flows around bumps and obstacles, creating odd shapes. The process of melting, breaking apart, and refreezing can carve ice into unexpected forms. Antarctica also has incredibly strong downward-blowing winds that sculpt ice into dramatic formations over time. No secret doorway, unfortunately. And speaking of doors, for years, Ushuaia, Argentina, has been called the gateway to Antarctica, the last stop before the icy continent, the place where expeditions begin. But there's another option. Punta Arenas, Chile. Let's compare them. Ushuaia is closer to Antarctica. It's the top departure point for tourists going on cruises. But no regular flights to Antarctica. No major scientific bases operating from here. It's basically controlled by the military, which refuses to allow private flights, only commercially operated ships. Yes, Punta Arenas is further from Antarctica, but 22 countries and global organizations use it as their main base. There are regular flights to Antarctica happening there every year. Private airlines can actually operate here, making it the real air connection to Antarctica. Ushuaia may have the best location physically, but Punta Arenas actually runs the show. Argentina made a huge error in picking its Antarctic airbase. Instead of setting up a simple, accessible base at sea level, they built Marambio Base, very high, on rough terrain, completely impossible to reach by land. Everything has to be flown in by helicopter, making operations slow, expensive, and frustrating. For 50 years, Argentina stubbornly stuck to this bad decision, while Chile set up efficient, well-planned bases that the world now uses. If things don't change, Ushuaia will be nothing more than a tourist stop. But what's terrifying is that Antarctica seems to be returning to its past. It's supposed to be the coldest place on Earth, but something shocking happened just recently. For the first time in recorded history, temperatures in Antarctica broke 68 degrees Fahrenheit. This continent is buried under miles of ice. Usually, temperatures there can drop to minus 112 degrees. But in the winter of 2020, scientists recorded an insane 69 degrees on Seymour Island, hotter than many places in Europe at that time. Scientists believe there are several reasons for that. First, there are changes in the way heat moves around the planet's waters. Second, melting permafrost due to the planet warming. It looks like the climate is changing faster than expected.
landmass, and they lived right in the heart of it. Now, this family coexisted with all the dinosaurs. The dinosaurs ruled the world back then, and the snakes couldn't be all that dangerous. They lived in the dinosaur's shadow, adapting to survive. Some of them fed on small mammals. And when the age of dinosaurs finally ended in a fiery cataclysm, it was time for these snakes to celebrate. After the asteroid disaster, the world entered a new era of heat and humidity. The warmer the climate, the easier it is for cold reptiles to thrive. Snakes, including Titanoboa, grew larger than ever, but so did the members of this family. All the snakes spread across continents, growing larger and scarier by the century. And eventually, Titanoboa stopped being the only ruler of jungles. Fast forward to about 47 million years ago. Now it's the Middle Eocene epoch, the tropical lowlands of what today is western India. A lush, swampy place, full of rivers and pools. The earth was warmer, with turtles and crocodile-like creatures basking in the sun. And there evolved the largest and most fearsome predator of them all, Vasuki indicus. Even the name feels important. Vasuki, the serpent king of Hindu mythology, a colossal snake that's coiled around the neck of Lord Shiva, strong and loyal. And the indicus part is because the snake's fossils were discovered in India. Vasuki surpassed Titanoboa and grew to a jaw-dropping length of 50 feet, like a 4-story building. It also weighed as much as a small elephant. Unlike Titanoboa, who preferred to hunt in the rivers, Vasuki mostly hunted on land, though it still could venture into the water when needed. It prowled the marshy ground with quiet, calculated movements, blending with the dense undergrowth. Vasuki also ate crocodiles, massive turtles, and even early whales in local water pools. No one stood a chance. It had immense muscles and squeezed with unimaginable force. But the snake's jaws were much scarier. Unlike Titanoboa and today's pythons, Vasuki couldn't swallow massive prey whole. Instead, it ate them alive with its teeth, just like this. Fast and absolutely brutal, it was an apex predator of its time. And don't forget that we're not talking about one Titanoboa or one Vasuki. These snakes were part of entire populations. In the Paleocene, rivers were full of various Titanoboas. Some were younger, smaller ones, fighting for survival, while the oldest and largest ones dominated the waterways, in the same way as generations of Vasuki indicus competed with each other for thousands of years. Through the years, many siblings of this family got themselves a region to rule over. For example, alongside Vasuki, this big guy was thriving in northern Africa, in what is today's Egypt. Back then, this land was full of water and swamps. Before we learn more about other snakes, this one was considered the largest, about 36 feet long. That's still bigger than today's most powerful snakes, like the green anaconda. But then, we reached the Pleistocene epoch, from about 2.5 million years ago to only 11,000 years ago. Modern humans were evolving all over the world, and now the snakes had a new problem, an even worse one than dinosaurs. While we were developing brains, in Australia, there ruled the local king of snakes. Their names also come from legends. That's how indigenous Australians called their mythological rainbow serpent the creator of the world. It's like a problem of a chicken and an egg. Was the snake named after a deity, or did the Aboriginal people create their deity after a snake? Ancient Australians coexisted with those predators for thousands of years. They warned their children how to avoid dangerous spots, passing down stories of the terrifying serpents. In their legends, the great rainbow serpent was shaping the land, rivers, and features of the world. These legends were most likely inspired by the powerful nature of those snakes. If only they knew that these animals weren't even as huge as Vasuki or Titanoboa. Though they were still dangerous. Urlungor was up to 26 feet in length. They preferred the more green and humid parts of Miocene Australia, like waterways with lush plants around the riverbanks. And there was much more potential prey. Urlungor had a thick body as wide as a human thigh. It loved to hunt in what is today the northwest Queensland. Its fossils were found in the limestone of Riverslade. It was a fascinating find. The skull was almost intact, with teeth and everything, which is crazy considering that snake skulls are very fragile and usually don't survive fossilization. Just like snakes before it, Urlungor didn't rely on venom. It was a constrictor, quick and powerful. But at least now these reptiles weren't as brutal. Their hugs quickly caused cardiac arrest in their prey. So the end came rather quickly. Also, they no longer could swallow the prey whole, and didn't have the same sharp teeth as Vasuki or Titanoboa. So both Urlungor and Wanambi had to eat very slowly, just like pythons today. Meanwhile, Wanambi was about 20 feet long. This one had a similar head, so it could only hunt marsupials, reptiles, and other little things that ventured too close. Wanambi's domain was the waterhole. It lay coiled in the shade, motionless, its body blending seamlessly with the dusty earth. If kangaroos and wallabies cautiously approached to drink, they wouldn't even notice the predator until it was too late. The Wanambi snakes lingered in Australia for millions of years. Even when the climate and ecosystem changed, it didn't bother these guys. In fact, they thrived in Australia's cooler, drier regions. Yet, even giants fall. Time moved on, the earth cooled even more, and nature began to change. Wanambi managed to last up to around 50,000 years ago, and could have lasted longer if it wasn't for humans. The same Aboriginal Australians who once feared Wanambi eventually spelled the end for the snake. All these years of being the apex predator, only for the little apes to hunt you into extinction. But that's how evolution goes. Eventually, all the giant snakes disappeared, leaving behind only their fossils and stories like this one.
There's a place on Earth so dangerous that even the most fearsome creatures of today wouldn't last a moment there. It used to exist in what we now call southeastern Morocco. Sharp teeth could slice through flesh with terrifying ease. This monster stood almost as tall as a house and was faster, stronger, and precision. Oh, and the skies were a fun place too. With all these pterosaur creatures flying around, these guys are often mistaken for flying dinosaurs, but they were actually a different kind, more like close cousins of dinosaurs. These majestic reptiles soared above the Chem Chem Beds and had wingspans that could stretch up to 30 feet. The fingers were feathery, with a fourth finger kinda like bats. They could glide through the air so easily thanks to their super light skeleton. But it wasn't just the dinosaurs that made the Chem Chem Beds so horrifying. The waters also hid their own dark secrets. They were home to giant, terrifying fish and crocodile-like creatures. Their jaws were strong enough to crush bone, and they were lurking beneath the surface, waiting for anything unlucky enough to stumble into their path. One of the river creatures was Sarcosuchus, also called the super croc. Being about 40 feet long, it could easily swallow an adult human. Or better yet, it could take on a full-grown dinosaur and win. Its jaws snapped with unimaginable force, and no creature, not even Spinosaurus, was safe from it. Coelacanths could also hang out in the rivers. It was a monstrous predator that could easily swallow a huge fish whole. They had these creepy, icky fins that moved in a way similar to how human arms and legs move. And they could also kind of raise their heads like humans because of a special joint in their skull. Ew. Fun fact, we thought these monsters had gone extinct 60 million years ago, together with dinosaurs. But recently, we rediscovered them living and thriving in the Indian Ocean. Turns out they were just hiding in the deep waters. They probably didn't even notice the dinosaur asteroid or humans at all. Yay? Don't worry, over millions of years, they became basically harmless. They got 4 to 5 times smaller, even though they still weigh about 200 pounds. Just imagine what they were like back in the day. Chem Chem waters were also home to giant lungfish and other creepy aquatic creatures. So you couldn't even drink or take a swim safely without getting bitten by something. Whew, what a place. Even turtles there were the size of cars. Imagine trying to survive in a world where creatures like this are literally everywhere. And I mean everywhere. This place was unique not because huge beasts lived there, but because of the sheer number of predators. You might think, it shouldn't be that easy for all these predators to hang out in one place, right? And you're right. Seems like prey was scarce there. That's even more chilling. All the predators just wandered around, hunting whatever meager life remained. And if there's none, then fighting each other. For years, scientists have wondered why it was the case. Maybe that's just how life was back then. And all corners of Earth were crazy like that. Or is there something special about this place? Some even say that maybe it's just because we only found predators' fossils, while normal friendly animals have disappeared, and that the fossil record might be skewed. But who knows? And the environment itself was just as fascinating as the beasts who lived there, just a bit more friendly. It's hard to imagine, but back in the day, this desert was a green paradise, humid and full of rivers. The heat of the sun scorched the land. The climate was hot, so hot that even the poles were warm. The weather there was extreme. Dry seasons followed by intense storms, which shaped the land and life. The giant rivers carved their way through this landscape. They stretched from the Sahara, emptying into the ancient Tethys Ocean to the north. If you were there, you'd see vast, interconnected basins, and beyond them, the central Atlantic Ocean. The floodplain stretched out beneath a sweltering sky. The rivers were just as wild as local animals, flowing lazily one day, but raging like furious beasts the next. At first, these rivers were powerful, carving deep channels through the land and creating wide sandbanks. But over time, they slowed down, and the landscape changed into shallow ponds and salt-covered flats. As water gradually faded away, it left behind a patchwork of wetlands and slow-moving waters. Right now, the Chem Chem Beds is a vast, rugged desert where time has stood still for millions of years. If you visited it, you'd see a giant escarpment, its rocky face winding along the border of Morocco and Algeria, bathed in the sun's harsh light. Beneath your feet would lie layers of fossilized history. That's one of the reasons why scientists were long fascinated with this place. It must be one of the most comprehensive collections of fossils ever discovered in northern Africa. There are fossils from other parts of Africa, of course, like Egypt's Bahariya Formation. But they don't tell us much about life during this time, not like Chem Chem. That's all because those rivers we mentioned in hotter and drier places, they've eroded or still remain buried under the sand. The first discoveries from Chem Chem began in the late 1940s. A scientist named Schubert uncovered bony fish fossils among the escarpment near the Morocco-Algeria border. Just a few years later, a paleontologist, René Lavoca, took things to the next level. Traveling by camelback, he scoured the desert landscape and uncovered a real treasure trove of fossils. He found the partial skeleton of a massive herbivore dinosaur. Finally, at least one peaceful creature in the Chem Chem Beds. This long-necked giant roamed the ancient river valleys and ate leaves like a good boy. For the next several decades, scientists only did small-scale fossil hunting expeditions to this place. There were modest discoveries made here and there. Then, in the 1970s, German paleontologist Helmut Alberti led his team to the Chem Chem Beds, and that's when things took a wild turn. They uncovered fossils of prehistoric fish, crocodiles, dinosaurs, and pieces of the infamous Spinosaurus. Imagine being one of the scientists on that team. They were probably jumping from excitement. By the mid-1990s, the fossil game changed dramatically. Incredible new species were identified from the Chem Chem Beds. Over the years, the discovery pace has only accelerated. Paleontologists, armed with new tools and techniques, have uncovered more fossils than ever before, and there's only more to come. When we look at creatures in the animal kingdom, we often have the following thought. If they have similar traits, they must be related somehow. Zebras, horses, and camels must have some common ancestor. Same goes for dogs and jackals. Somewhere back in their lineage, they must have some common great-great-great-grand wolf, right? Well, the way evolution works in nature is way more complex. Take, for instance, convergent evolution, which is when different creatures evolve independently from each other but end up having similar traits. We only need to look at sharks and dolphins to see how this works. At first glance, they look very similar, aquatic creatures with some species having roughly the same size. But turns out they're mostly unrelated. Sharks are fish. They reproduce by laying eggs and evolved to have the ability to sniff out blood in the water to feed themselves. Dolphins, on the other hand, are mammals. They're friendly and have a way more interesting social life. Take bottlenose dolphins, which have their own special whistles that they use similar to how humans use their names. Not only do they develop this type of whistle to introduce themselves to other dolphins, but they can also learn such names so they can better communicate with each other. Sure, sharks and dolphins did have a common ancestor, but this one lived in the sea almost 300 million years ago. It's safe to say, dolphins and sharks aren't even cousins these days. Another more shocking example of convergent evolution is that of whales and bats. Most of the creatures we can name on the top of our heads use light and sight to understand the world around them. But there is a specific set of creatures that relies on sound to paint them a picture of their environment. What they do is they emit a sound which bounces back to them depending on the object it hits. This ability is called echolocation. Animals that have this feature emit sounds at frequencies above human hearing, called ultrasound. Those sound waves bounce off objects while they move around, allowing them to figure out where they are in a certain space. Echolocation is mostly used by toothed whales and by some species of bats. What's similar in both of these animals is that they need to hunt in the darkness. Despite this, they echolocate in very different ways. Bats, for instance, use their throats to generate ultrasound from their mouth or nose. Then, they proceed to listen for changes in the echoes. Their echolocation is so finely tuned that they can distinguish targets less than 0.01 inches apart, even if their target is moving. Whales, on the other hand, echolocate by pushing air through their nasal cavity. This movement creates vibrations in a special fatty organ called the melon. This organ focuses and modulates the sound, which then passes into the water around the whale. Whales then pick up the reflections of these sounds through their lower jaw and around the ears. Another striking example of evolutionary convergence is that of ichthyosaurus and dolphins. Visually, the Mesozoic fish lizards named Ichthyosaurus seem very similar to modern dolphins. But the friendly mammals are much more related to giraffes and camels than the ancient creatures. Despite being 200 million years apart, they do share some common traits which mislead people into thinking they belong to the same species. But that's mostly because they lived in the same environment. They both evolved to feature dorsal fins, which keep them balanced while swimming. Now, let's look at Phytosaurus and crocodiles. The first ones were reptiles that roamed the Earth back in the Triassic period. They weren't dinosaurs, but they lived at the same time as the first dinosaurs did. Even though they look very similar, the first crocodiles popped up more than 70 million years later in the Cretaceous period. These two even fooled paleontologists at first. They initially assumed that phytosaurs were the ancestors of crocodiles. Placodonts and turtles look similar too. Placodonts, however, appeared about the same time as the dinosaurs did, somewhere around 235 million years ago. Like modern turtles, they lived in marine environments, but they were surrounded by predators. So, they evolved to have really strong shells to protect themselves. Turtles, however, made it to the scene around 100 million years later. Even modern cats have ancient lookalikes. They were called the Sparacidons, but they were carnivores and marsupials. They used to live in the South American area and resembled the saber-toothed tiger, which is now extinct. Speaking of saber-toothed tigers, how about one that's also related to the kangaroo? Yeah, this creature used to freely roam the Earth around 300 million years ago. The Thylacosmilus may have looked like a feline, but it was a marsupial, meaning it had a pouch of skin in which it carried its pups for a certain period after their birth, like kangaroos and opossums do today. It's difficult to estimate what they looked like since a full skeleton has never been found, but we do know they weighed between 180 to 260 pounds. When we picture a present-day elephant, we always imagine them with their tusks protruding upwards. Well, that's not how their ancestors did it. About 20 million years ago, there lived a prehistoric elephant-like creature named Deinotherium. It did, however, have both tusks curving down from their jaw. As with many other prehistoric creatures, we don't know why they had this feature the other way around. But one theory suggests they used them as anchors. By securing themselves to riverbanks, they were able to safely sleep without drifting off. The last thylacine passed away in the early 20th century. Their extinction was one of the most tragic natural events in modern times. For the last 2,000 years, they have been known to live only on the island of Tasmania. Despite the name, they looked more like foxes than felines. However, thylacines were marsupials rather than placental mammals like foxes. The two-lake wallaby was one of the most beautiful and majestic creatures ever to have lived. It used to be found in Australia and New Zealand. They were very similar to the kangaroos and featured fine fur with shifting bands of darker and lighter gray across their backs. Surprisingly, they were dubbed monkey face, but they had no connection whatsoever to modern monkeys, apart from both being mammals. What made them so special was the way they moved around. Their standard movement consisted of 2 short hops, followed by a long one. After that, the wallaby would simply stare into the sky. Don't be fooled though, the two-legged wallaby was extremely rapid. Females were generally taller than males, and they appear to have been quite sociable animals, at times being particularly fond of a certain location. They were also nocturnal. Hyracoodonts and horses share a lot of similar features, but hyracoodonts used to exist in the Eocene and Oligocene periods, and they went extinct around 23 million years ago. In their whole group, they featured very diverse species and came in many different sizes, from the small pony-like to the colossal Paraceratherium, which is one of the largest land-living mammals ever to exist. Modern horses, however, appeared around 2 million years ago. Let's do a little experiment together. Start by stretching your arms out. If you were to draw a line from your fingertips to your shoulder, it would measure around 28 inches. Now, try to picture an insect with a wingspan this big. Hold on a minute, you won't need a large can of bug spray, don't worry. They're extinct. But the gigantic Meganeuropsis did live around 250 to 300 million years ago. However, they most likely resembled the present-day dragonflies, despite not being technically related. Scientists figured out that they were not true dragonflies because of differences in the shape of their wing veins. Scientists still don't know why these bugs turned out so big. Some believe insects are limited in size because of the small quantity of oxygen they're able to take in. In the times when these insects roamed the Earth, the levels of oxygen in our atmosphere were much higher, so that might be one explanation. Other specialists think that they got so big because there wasn't any other predator large enough to pick them up from the ground.